without further ado, I'd like to introduce Michael Prosserman, who is the moderator for today, better known in the local hip hop community as Pieces. Mike is a best-selling author, b-boy, breakdancer, university instructor, and certified coach who specializes in scaling startups, team culture, fundraising, and succession. In Michael's new book, Building Unity, Leading a Nonprofit from Spark to Succession, he shares practical tools and stories to launching, leading, and leaving a sustainable organization. This organization is called Unity Charity that focuses on hip hop as wellness. So thank you, Mike, for being here with us today and moderating this very important conversation. So I'll leave it to you to do the land acknowledgement and start the conversation.
Thank you, Jessica, and thanks everyone for coming today. I must first just say I am just overwhelmed with excitement, energy. It's funny because oops, can you hear me? I just got muted, I got unmuted. I was just like ready and I had this like exhausting day, but then as soon as I got into the room, like everyone, all the panelists, I felt their energy and I just felt this immediate sense of community. And I think today we're gonna talk a bit about that, and just seeing everyone's faces personally energized me. And before we get into all of that stuff, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the land in which we're operating on. And I'd like to acknowledge the sacred land which U of T operates on, as it's been the site of human activity for over 15,000 years. This land is a territory of the Huron, Wendat, and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was a subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community and on this territory. So I just think that is mandatory for every session that we sort of reflect on, especially when we're talking about community, and in this case, hip hop and mental health, to acknowledge where we're standing, quite literally. I know we're all in different parts of the city right now, but just taking a moment to pause and reflect on the space that we take up, the place that we are, the histories of the land in which we stand. So, you know, I just see Rondell smiling right now, and it just brought that. So when you turn on your cameras, this brings the good energy, because it's so weird being on Zoom all the time. Can I just say that? Can I just say, talking about mental health, like Zoom, why, you know, why? Okay, that's my rant for the day. I'm gonna let that go. So thanks to Hart House for bringing us out here today. Again, I'm just so excited to be able to introduce these incredible human beings, hip hop artists, contributors to our country, let alone this city, on a national scale of hip hop music, of breaking, of different elements of hip hop culture. Before I do that, I'll just say quickly, the connection of crews for me personally has been something that's really helped me through some of my deepest and darkest times. My crew, even the power of the cipher, like jumping into the center and being appreciated for all the gifts you have to offer. And I offer that metaphor sometimes as an idea for folks to consider. How can we create spaces where people can just be celebrated for being their awesome selves? Because we don't have enough of that in the world. And when we're talking about mental health and hip hop, you know, these can be really, really challenging spaces as well. So yeah, I'd invite you in the theme of Mental Health Awareness Month. You know, I find these months sometimes really weird because we're saying, okay, this is the month for this, but I mean, every day we wake up and breathe, you know, our mental health is there. And every time we, you know, go to sleep, our mental health is there or not there, you know. And I think I want to encourage and just take a moment to reflect on what it means to take care of our mental health every single day, not just this month, not just on a day, but actually care for ourselves throughout the entire year and for those around us, because it's flowing, you know, it's ebbing and it's flowing. Last thing I'll say before I share a short poem and then make the introductions is just sort of a trigger warning and saying we're talking about some pretty serious stuff today. And if you need help or you find yourself in a crisis, you know, reach out to health professionals, reach out to friends, reach out to who you need to reach out to get help, because it's not easy, especially in isolation, especially with all the things going on in the world every single day. The news is a scary place, and Phoenix is a ball of love, which is great to know, and I think you're gonna feel that today from all the panelists. So without further ado, I'm gonna share a very short snippet from my book around my experience with mental health as a hip hop artist practitioner, and in many ways my breakdown of mental health and a moment where I really struggled as a leader. So I'm going to invite you into my world, and yeah, if I can get everyone rubbing their hands together, just give me some love, because I get hella nervous. That's love. Oh, we got cameras on for that too. Oh, that's good love. Okay, sick. Okay, here we go. It's coming from here, but it's coming from here. All right. My hands are shaking. I'm tearing up. I can barely speak. I'm frozen. It feels like my chest is going to jump out of my throat. Although I'm in no real danger, nothing has ever felt more real than the terror going through my veins. This is anxiety, real deal anxiety. I take a deep breath and keep moving forward. I go to my next meeting, do my next presentation, go on with my day as normal, but I don't feel well. I've decided I'm not going to let this own my life. I will not let it win. I can live a great life, even if I feel terrible inside. I owe it to myself and everyone around me to continue moving forward despite how I feel. The experience is the most perplexing challenge I've ever faced. When I'm in control, I can handle it. 100 emails a day, no problem. 12 meetings a day with no breaks in 4 locations across the city, no problem. Eating while doing a phone conference while driving to a program in Mississauga with someone in my car, no problem. I think you get the vibe. Until it is a problem. And now I've learned a problem that I can't change. Or is it a problem? Am I a problem? No, I'm me, with every great thing and every not so great thing about me. I will continue to always be me despite my anxiety, my illness. Is it an illness or more of a challenge? I'm not my anxiety. I'm a person who cares and loves and gives everything I can. I'm a b-boy who dances to express my story. I'm not the sleepless nights or the panic attacks. I'm not my anxiety. Although it's scary, I will not live in fear. I will live with pride, joy, self-worth, feelings that everyone deserves. Although it's as real as rain, it's distorted pain. And if I can recognize this with no intention to change it, I do not become it. I get to be me with it. It's a moon cast shadow in my day, but the clouds always clear, even if there's a hurricane, a typhoon, or a tornado. It feels like the end, but it's not. It's part of the journey, my new path. It's part of me, my day, my life. I won't resist or avoid. I'll just be with my anxiety. Thank you. So that's the first time I've ever performed a spoken word type vibe thing. You can check it in my new book if anyone wants a free copy. I know we're giving a few of those away today. I am literally sweating, so this is the perfect time for me to pass this to someone else. And you're not going to hear much from me except sort of digging into the stories of the amazing individuals in this room. I just sort of want to check in because I know we have some folks here and some folks have joined. But if you just take a moment to reflect and think about, in the spirit of self-care and caring for ourselves, like what is one self-care practice you are currently using in today's pandemic and all the things that are being thrown at us. One is one thing that you do to take care of yourself. If you could take 30 seconds to a minute and just type something into the chat box that gets you through the day, that brings you up. Saying I don't feel like it and not feeling guilty, yes. Meditating daily, yes. Reading the Bible. God time in the AM. Or b-boying, working out, cooking, absolutely. Focusing on what I can control, like physical health, hell yeah. Doing nothing, please, let's do more nothing. Let's get some precedented times here already. Like I'm tired of these unprecedented times. One was exercising, but I can't do that anymore. Fair enough. Yeah. What's changing? What's changing in our world? So thank you. That's beautiful. You know, I really want to take moments to reflect. And when you have a question and you want to share something, you know, push that into the chat box, because we're gonna make this as interactive as possible as we can through this like computer screen. See how I'm almost touching you, but I'm not. So okay, here we go. So I'm going to introduce the amazing panelists. And again, now I'm sweating again because I'm thinking about introducing people that I look up to, that I respect, that, you know, I've crossed stages with, that brought out to festivals, been part of events with. It's so overwhelming. And, you know, I can feel the energy. People that I've battled against, Jay Revel, you know, we've had our moments too. I love the fact that we can come together and have this conversation. It's a beautiful thing. First off, Phoenix Pagliacci, sorority, opening for heavy hitters like Snoop Dogg, Miguel, the internet, many, many more. Also, I'm going to cut back your bios, because if I literally read the bios, we wouldn't be here. We would be here till 9:30 p.m. if I read everyone's full bio. So I pulled some snippets and sort of the moments in which we interacted and some moments we had. Pagliacci Studios, the studio focused on recording young, talented artists. Check them out. Bliss Shoes. Love this, the intersection between bliss and issues, a cyclical outreach initiative dedicated to finding the silver lining between those two things. Bliss, issues, bliss shoes, I think you get it. Check that out. Eternia, Juno nominated, trailblazing for Canadian hip hop, toured all over the world, opened for literal superstars like Nas, Kendrick Lamar, Q-Tip, Busta. The list goes on and on and on. Her fifth album, At Last, was named one of the top 25 albums of 2010. What? With legendary guest appearances. If you're not already Googling it, please do. Yeah, I just checked her on Instagram, and I love the fact that you're doing these soul check-ins. So I want to hear a bit more about that, because I enjoyed it and it checked into my soul, and giving people some reflections to check into theirs. Whew, I'm only on number 3 now. Solitaire, oh my gosh, only number 3? I can't even put these in an order. It's just, you know, that little emoji. A multi-Juno nominated hip hop artist, producer, with producing, songwriting for some iconic artists that many of you know: Julie Black, Melanie Fiona, Glenn Lewis. Toured all over the world with Choclair and Cardinal. In fact, at the Unity Festival, which I'll never forget, you know, we've had like Jizza and all these big names, Talib Kweli, but still the one that I will never forget was when Solitaire and Cardi destroyed Dundas Square. So yeah, I remember them just being covered in sweat, and just the audience was covered in sweat, and it was something special. And program manager for FU, the Forgiveness Project, which, you know, love to see the real artists, the ones who are actually doing the work and producing and making the music, giving back and contributing to community in a meaningful way. Definitely something that every one of these people in this room today are doing. And that's something truly special and something truly important, because the power we have as artists and giving that power to young people is just, it's transformational. And Solitaire has done an incredible job of doing that through his work. Jay Revel, oh my gosh, we have lots of history together. I've known this guy since I was literally 13 years old. and we used to go at it in the ciphers and the battles. He also started when he was 14. You'll see him on the dance floor doing his unique footwork, flows, and styles. Part of one of Canada's most accomplished and well-known breaking crews, the Supernaturals crew, also a rival to my crew. So we used to, set it off in the ciphers. We still do, but not now. It's all love because, it's kind of cool to hear and see. I've always respected Jay Rebel for the incredible work he's done with communities. And someone is doing the real deal work when you meet their students and you see them in the cipher and you're like, yo, you're dope. Where'd you learn? Jay Rebel. Where'd you learn? Jay Rebel. So the amount of times I've heard that lets me know that that work is real, and I think that we have to acknowledge that, that the work that we teach goes down through the generations. And Jay Rebel has really been one of those people in the community, in the breaking community, who's contributed across the generations. So, props to you, man. I'm really happy to have you part of this conversation. Finally, last but not least, Rondella J, an entrepreneur, speaker, spoken word practitioner. So much more nervous to give a spoken word thing in front of a spoken word practitioner who I know and respect, founder of Rise Edutainment. And I love this, uses his gifts to empower through edutainment, education combined with entertainment. Rise, reaching intelligent souls everywhere. If you haven't heard of them, check them out. They received the Mayor's Arts Youth Award for their work. Rondell has been the author of an incredible book, which I've read, called I Am Not My Struggles. Highly recommend checking that out. And he pretty much is just like Torontonian of the Year, local hero. Like, this man has been across the literal headlines as someone who's doing real deal work. So again, it's an honor. It really is. If you want to see what Rise is doing, check them out on Instagram live on Mondays. I'm sure everyone's going to get to promote the things that they're doing. So I'll give the space over to you. So remember, I did a 15-minute version of what could have been an hour-and-a-half version of introduction. So I apologize, but like, these people are awesome. So without further ado, I'm going to ask the panelists, if you can, to unmute your mics, and when it feels right to sort of jump in, or if you want to sort of kick us off. I'm going to start with some questions. And today is about mental health and its intersections with hip hop, and sometimes the lack of intersections with hip hop because of some of the barriers there around having these types of conversations. So I'm just going to start by throwing out the first question we prepared. Why is the topic of hip hop and mental health important to you? And maybe Eternia, do you mind starting us off?
I didn't expect that, but of course, I don't mind. First of all, it's just really an honor and a privilege to be here, and especially with the other guests that are here and yourself. Your spoken word poem really took me places, and I think personally in my own life, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case for everyone here, because we all struggle with if it's not anxiety, it's something. And I think I was wondering if, I know why we're not doing this, but I'm like, yo, the first question should be, so what's your mental health issue? Like, we all have it. And so I think it's important to note, for me, I love just viewing life holistically. So everything is intertwined and interconnected with everything else. Everyone is intertwined and interconnected with everyone else. And to me, the beginning of a mental health breakdown is the compartmentalization of things that are meant to be whole. And so for me, hip hop, a microcosm or like a microculture of the larger world that we live in, but still a very important and influential culture. It's like, you can't chop off your arm, you can't chop off your leg. So we're doing ourselves a disservice if we're operating this culture that we love and are so passionate in, and we're teaching in it, and we're advocating in it, and we're engaging in it, and we're not actually talking about all the things that are holistically a part of us. I view it as like emotional, spiritual, mental, physical, and beyond. So, in shortened terms, that is why hip hop and mental health matter, and mental health matters across the board in any culture.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I think that compartmentalization of a whole is a powerful metaphor for what might be going on in the world right now. I know it's hard to pass the mic, but please and feel free, just either raise your hand or jump right in. I'm just going to leave some space for the panelists to say you know, why is the topic of this hip hop mental health important to you?
I guess I can jump in. Can you hear me?
Please.
Um, you know, in doing some of the work that I do with the FU project in jail, one of the things about hip hop that really, it never ceases to amaze me, the power of this culture that started in the Bronx 40, odd years ago. But the way that hip hop is used by the different generations, it's like now I recognize I was always aware of the power of hip hop as a tool for social justice and change and empowerment. But now more so than ever, with the advent of the understanding and the acceptance of mental health challenges that we all face in some degree, shouts out to the homie Eternia. I feel like, it is literally like a blueprint for understanding trauma and anxiety and PTSD. Like, Shook Ones from Mobb Deep is just as meaningful to me now, but for completely different reasons than it was for me back then. It's like literally outlining the anxiety and the trauma that these guys suffered. And doing this work has, adjusted my understanding of the symptoms and the repercussions of trauma and PTSD on marginalized communities in a way that's never really truly been studied. And just comparing it to there has been research done on PTSD for soldiers who return home from wars, about what that violence, the effect that's had on them psychologically. But there's never been that kind of work or study done for communities who experience the same type of violence. But the symptoms are the same. They're virtually identical. And so hip hop is kind of like, even when we listen to what a lot of the young people are saying, we might look at it or like the layperson might look at it as like, oh, they're just rapping about nonsense and stuff like that. But now with a trained eye, you can understand that a lot of this stuff is, their outlet for expressing some real trauma in their lives. So that's why the connection between hip hop, especially other genres, there's emotional connection, but I think hip hop has it in its DNA, the ability to communicate things in a deeper level.
Yeah, especially, and in the DNA, I find that interesting. Like it's in the way that it was created, in the way that it was birthed, in the way that it manifests in society today. Yeah, thanks. That's amazing.
I think I can jump in next. And
okay.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of something you said in your poem. That was a really dope poem, by the way, Mikey. I know you for so many other things, but it's great to see the spoken word and hear the spoken word. There's one line that you said in there, it's not me. And you mentioned it's a part of my day. And I think it's important to understand that mental health is something, it's very easy to look at the problems we have and then, really enrapture who we are with the problems we have. And so you're kind of stuck on this here, as opposed to kind of looking at the problems we have and being more like observant of it and not seeing it as like a part of who you are as a person, but really just an experience or something you're going through. And I really liked how your poem emphasized that. But I think, when I think about hip hop, I think about, growing up in my community here in Scarborough and just going through a whole bunch of stuff and not really having an outlet, a place to express what I was going through. So I fought kids and I got in trouble at school, and I don't know, I just like being the class, not even the class clown. I just like being the bully and just getting stuff out in a different way. And I think hip hop is that way to express that, that aggression that's really pent up inside of us to really get it out. So when I think about hip hop and I think about mental health, I think it's really synonymous, because it's really about getting out your thoughts on paper or just speaking them. That's why freestyling is really important. I think hip hop is very cathartic. It's therapeutic, because it's how you spit, it's how you dance, it's how you express yourself. By drawing, it's DJing, it's just different ways of getting this pent up energy out. And I think it's really important for us as people to see other ways, you know, if not hip hop, but just about expression, how we can express who we are as a people, and the things we go through. Because as Attorney mentioned earlier, we all go through it, man. You know, nobody is, I think mental health challenges are not discriminatory. They don't discriminate whether you're a good person or you have money in your pocket. You're going to go through it. You're going to experience it at some point. So, you know, I think I just really focus on the power of expression, of really transforming your pain to power. And, you know, thinking of hip hop as just taking a little bit from everything, every little bit, and forming something. You know, I really think about what we go through when our parents, like, I can't speak for all of y'all, but my parents never had these terms or terminologies. And so here we are as a generation, just taking a little bit from our parents, a little bit from society, a little bit from this, just like hip hop took from blues and jazz and different things. And, you know, you make something out of it. So that's what I think. It's really synonymous with one another. Yeah.
Oh yeah, thanks, Rondell. And what you said there, pain into power. You know, it's very few syllables with a whole lot of meaning. You know, and appreciate you sharing your story. But that really struck me when you said that. It just, you know, I think about pain and how that can transform through hip hop. You know, so thank you. J Rebel, you were gonna jump in.
Yeah, I just want to kind of like jump off what Solitaire was saying, and also Randall, in terms of, you know, that example you gave around PTSD and, you know, some of the stigma that's attached with mental health. Because I feel like for certain communities and different cultures, it's something that people don't talk about, but manifests a lot in the communities that we're in. I grew up in Jane and Finch, Lawrence Heights, so I'm sure most of you guys know those communities if you grew up in the city. And when you talk about war zone, like, it is a literal war zone. You know what I mean? We've had since June, since I came back to the city, you know, like 71 shootings in this community alone. You know what I mean? So when you talk about trauma, PTSD, anxiety, and also the way that the violence manifests, like the mayor and the city and a lot of people in the police are talking about gang violence, but they're not talking about the pain and the stress that a lot of these young people are under, and how it's manifesting in homicides. You know, and not just in like in the street violence, but also in the music too. You know, a lot of the kids that I work with, they don't even really listen to hip hop. They listen to drill music and trap. You know what I mean? And when you listen to the lyrics, like you were saying with Mobb Deep and Shook Ones, like, you could see how early mental health was manifesting in hip hop, but people weren't really putting a name to it or diagnosing it. And that's one of the terrifying things about the issues that are going on, is that nobody's having this discussion in hip hop, and no one's having it in the communities in general. You know, when people are asking for resources and supports, we're getting more police, we're getting programs cut, like the programs that we run. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and youth that would normally be accessing those services are not, which is also fueling the violence. You know what I mean? So it's crazy, you know. And when I think about my own upbringing and stuff like that as an adult, you know, looking at the things that I witnessed and experienced as a youth, I feel like for me, hip hop was that outlet. You know, like Randall was saying, and pieces like being in the cipher and just being able to get out of my environment and being in a different situation, you know, and be able to channel that energy. And even going back further, what you were saying about hip hop in the Bronx, I feel like a lot of those kids too, you know, they didn't have those institutional resources. So hip hop was therapeutic. It was our therapy, you know what I mean? Through the different elements and the different forms of expression. So I think for me, the conversation is really important around taking away the stigma and the shame that comes with, you know, the things that everybody goes through, you know, and manifest in different ways, and be able to understand that and come up with collective solutions to, you know, the root causes.
Word, yeah, thank you, J Rebel. And taking away the shame, man, like, that is, ooh, like, there's a lot of shame in our words sometimes. Like, even me sharing like that poem and you sharing now, and everyone sharing here so openly, like, just letting go of shame and being kind to ourselves in this moment, because we're having a dialogue now that may not have happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago or through our parents or different generations. So, I feel really blessed to be able to have this conversation with all of you, because we have the language and the tools to begin to have that conversation. So thank you, and thank you for sharing. Phoenix, did you want to jump in on this question? I'm gonna have a next sort of direction, or just let me know.
Everybody said everything. It's wild. Usually when I'm on a Zoom, I'm like the one to instigate the conversation. So this is refreshing. And the fact that, we're all from the same community and culture, hip hop, and we all, like you guys all said the thoughts in my head, like, E came on, said what she said. I'm like, all right, cool, I'll talk on this then. And then Sally came on and I was like, all right, I'll talk on this. And like, you guys all, like, you hit every base. It's not, it's intertwined. You can't remove them. There are songs that will always trigger certain emotions because of the words or the artist. And a lot of times, unfortunately, in hip hop music, when artists express themselves, they're considered emo or crazy, like Lauryn Hill, ODB, Batan from Slum Village. A lot of my favorites, even Elzai, he had a great project that talked about his dealing with mental health. And I don't know exactly why the stigma exists around hip hop culture, but definitely I think we all agree it needs to change. So I'll just say great points by all my fellow panelists, and I'm excited to hear the rest of the questions and answers. I might just go get some popcorn real quick. This is really good.
Thank you. Thanks, Phoenix. And just as you shout out, some of the Slum Village, I just showing the Toronto Love J shirt.
The inspiration right there.
100%.
Forever, man.
Forever,
Yes,
J Dilla.
J Rebel, that's the song I was thinking of when Solly said Mobb Deep Shook Ones. I was thinking of DMX Slippin'. When that came out, that went over everybody's head. We were all bumping it, singing along, like hype into it. Nobody took in the pain that he was talking about on the track. And so many Tupac songs, people talk about, oh, my favorite rapper, my favorite rapper. A lot of the quote unquote GOATs in everyone's top fives talk about the realest pain. They grew up in the hardest hoods. They dealt with the most difficult things, We don't talk about the fact that a dope boy who slang rock on the corner grew up to be a billionaire. We just kind of try to erase that past. We don't deal with the fact that his mother only recently, he came to accept that his mother was a lesbian, like these things don't get talked about in hip hop. And so it's good to see that there is a change. There is an acceptance of these kids who can be quote unquote emo or emotional and can talk about what they want, their feelings, their pain on a track, and have a whole audience gravitate towards them because either they relate to the story or because they now realize that it's okay to talk about these things. So I'm excited for the future of hip hop, for real.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, that's powerful. And I wonder, it actually segues perfectly into our next question, just around, how you use art and hip hop specifically to heal within yourself and within your community. Because in many ways, to many of the points that have been said, I think about it as, without you can't be doing that work, right? As much as you want to contribute, as much as you want to give parts of yourself to the communities that you're connected to, if you're not doing well, how do you contribute something else? How do you give if you have nothing left inside? So I wonder, how you use hip hop in your own lives to heal, but also within your communities in the community context, and how you sort of, you don't go down to E, you refuel your tank.
I guess I can kick this one off. So for me, my style of hip hop, or my preference in terms of writing, is storytelling. So I really like to speak from the perspective of either myself, my own stories, my own experiences, or a communal experience, maybe one that I have knowledge of through a third party, or an experience someone shared with me that I feel should be shared with other people. And a lot of times I find myself telling stories of people who maybe aren't the epitome of success in society, a lot of stereotypes that arise in hip hop culture, like the single mother, who's like maybe the pregnant teenager, the female who's promiscuous, all these perspectives that people take on as a negative. And maybe if a male is making a song about it, it becomes an anthem or, a song everybody sings at the club. But if it's a female and, being a female in hip hop, it's like, okay, if I tell this story right away, people are going to assume, oh, that's her personal story, so I find that the dichotomy is a little different for me being female, but it's important that for my own mental health, I can share my stories. So I do have songs where I talk about depression, anxiety, suicide. There are songs that I sing that are about, feeling hopeless. And even my most recent song that I released with Trippy is called Tell Me. It's about reaching out when you need help. And I'm finding that a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, the music that is coming out of hip hop right now is very expressive. There are topics being discussed that, years ago when I wrote, I felt like, oh man, no one's really gonna feel that. They're gonna put me in like the backpack rapper category, or like say, oh, she's so conscious because I said something that everybody was thinking and nobody wants to say. So I think it's important to recognize that there doesn't have to be two roads, coming back to what Eternity was talking about, that intersectionality, that you can have expression and honesty and still put it over a dope beat and have a dope storyboard behind it. And that's really important.
I'm glad you said that. I have to jump in because there's a couple of things that a number of people have mentioned that has taken my mind different places. One of them is similar to what you were just talking about, Phoenix, feeling like if I express myself on a track about something personal, it's once again, oh, well, because I'm a girl, or because I'm being emo, or it's about me. Sometimes it's not about me, and sometimes I'm telling someone else's story. Often in the case of me and my music, it is me being cathartic and processing pain personally, my own. And it just was something, it was a tool that I was given very young. I love to write, started writing raps probably at around 11 or 12 years old, and I haven't gone back. And it's been something that probably saved me a lot and helped me to do when you couldn't afford therapy, helped me to process the hows, the whens, the whys, the all that from writing lyrics. And interestingly enough, to tie that in terms of hip hop and how that helps with either our own mental health or others. And I do think that when we talk about these things openly on tracks, if given a platform, immediately you're starting that conversation and that dialogue for others. People know that they're not alone. People come up to you at the shows. That you're having a conversation about something that maybe they haven't spoken about publicly and you haven't spoken about publicly, and now you're having this public conversation about it, which is helpful. But on a personal note, I had I call it like a work burnout, but it really was like a mental health breakdown in 2016. And I was working full time at a long-term care home and witnessed a lot of things and thought I was good, and then I wasn't. But I say all that to say that I realized like 6 months or a year later, after doing like a bunch of therapy, that one thing that was missing in my life was creating and creativity and hip hop, really. And I think that a big part of why I even was able to get that far in my mental health breakdown was the fact that I was not using that cathartic thing that I was just saying, that cathartic process of writing and releasing. There's something about releasing too. I mean, for me, it was the releasing just as much as the writing, but without that, so like literally as essential to me as breathing, I have learned is writing out and processing things that are going on in my head and my heart. And we don't have to release all of it, but and it has definitely, I just by virtue of me talking to people that listen to the music, helped others to talk about it too and have words to their experiences as well.
Yes, and I always thank you. I always think about that fine line between the outlet and sort of letting it out and then the escape. I've always questioned that, because for me, sometimes when I use it as the outlet, it's healing and I need it. And then sometimes I'm looking at it, I'm like, but am I like it's kind of like a duality there that someone brought that to my attention recently, and I'm like, yeah, 50% of maybe 80% of the time for me that's a good thing, but 20% am I running away from something, and just acknowledging what's the difference between those two things.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever felt that way.
Like in terms of using it as an outlet, but kind of not using it as a distraction or an escape in an unhealthy way.
Yeah, when does it sort of tip over into that space?
I think for me, being able to, whether it's journaling or writing raps, it doesn't have to be writing raps. For me, writing has always helped me to figure out how I'm feeling and to be, it's a grounding practice for me. It's always been a grounding practice for me. As self-care
Nice.
is what we say, right?
Yeah, music is therapy for sure.
Yeah.
Especially when we can't afford therapy, because therapy is, why is it so expensive? Why is it so inaccessible in Canada?
Even the sliding scale 50% off is expensive. Let's talk about it.
Someone give us all a better benefit. We got to have a hip hop benefits plan. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Can we talk? Who do we even talk to for that?
I think someone is working on that right now, if I'm not mistaken. I think Swiss Beats and one of the other legends was talking about doing something like that for the veterans, so that once they get up there, they're good. I'm gonna look for that for you.
Wow, that's so necessary. Feels so far away, but wow. And then even therapy being the expression of that, and other methods of healing, not just, there's so many modalities for healing. Yeah, I'm curious to hear from others, like in what ways do you use art to heal within yourself and community?
Well, I can say that, tying it into my initial comment to the first question, music is an integral part of the programming that we do in jails across the city prior to COVID, of course. And it really is a revelation when you break down the lyrics of some, especially some of your favorite hip hop songs. I have conversations with some of my friends who are fathers now, some like 2, 3, 4 kids, some of them 4 daughters. And it's like, obviously, your reflection on the songs that you used to bump in the car on your way to the club. It's like, how do I square that with my daughter in the back seat, like Akinyele, put it in your mouth, like, it all the, that, and that's an iconic song. And I mean, even like in hip hop, girls and guys were singing those lyrics in the club the same way. So I mean, it's using it as a tool where you get to kind of look back on it and reflect on being accountable for the problematic ways in which they highlighted some of the issues from our communities, and that really affected how we see ourselves. You're talking about a generation of young black, brown, and marginalized men who grew up without fathers and were raised by hip hop. And I think Jay-Z, aside from being my favorite artist, he's one of those artists I don't argue when people say, oh, Jay-Z sucks. I'm like, yeah, okay, that says more about you than it does about him. The reason why he's important is because he has shown throughout his career accountability, growth, reflection. That's what the power of hip hop is at this stage. So that's how we use it. And it's like, even in terms of listening to the material of artists who are contemporary, young kids, I don't subscribe to that old head mentality of like, oh, music nowadays, this hip hop nowadays, it's not hip hop, it's bullshit. And it's like, no, it is a message board. It is a community message board for what's going on in these young people's minds. And if you want to look, if you can remember when your parents used to look at you saying, this hip hop, I don't understand what they're saying, this is nonsense. And we're supposed to like be building on the knowledge of our previous, our ancestors and our elders, and that we're still reflecting on this young generation's music the same way. That's problematic in and of itself. So it's like recognizing it as using it as a tool, I think, is important. And we do that in our jail program, and as for me personally, it's like I get to reflect on the work that, on the music that I'm listening to and that I've done. And you know, makes me be accountable for the things that I say, and how it can be manifested and interpreted by other people. So yeah, one of my other teachers just got here right now, so
Word up. Yeah, no, a tool for accountability. I mean, that's big. You know, we need more accountability in our lives, in the hip hop community, and in our families, in our, you know, friend circles. Like accountability can really slip, and I love the fact that you highlighted that, because it's such a big topic in mental health as well. You know, like how do we hold ourselves accountable when, you know, we turn around and we're doing one thing to harm ourselves while also healing ourselves on the other side, and that's human too. So, you know, who's to say that's right or wrong? But, you know, really interesting concept of how we hold ourselves accountable, how we call our friends out, how we call them, bring them in, you know, when they need that support. Such a big word. Yeah, it makes me think of some moments where I didn't hold myself accountable.
and I would also add to that that is one of our biggest problems in the hip hop community, is holding ourselves accountable. Like a lot of times when, you know, we have discussions about things like role models and mentorships, and I strongly disagree with the sentiment that artists shouldn't be considered role models. I always tell people, when you are in the public eye, you have the attention of you know, fans, you're a role model whether you choose to be or not. It's really just a matter of whether you accept the responsibility that comes with that, and that is where personal choice and, you know, the ability to kind of like decide what you want, how you want to live your life, that's a choice you're making. You can make that choice to say, you know what, I'm a role model, but I don't really care if you don't want your kids to do what I'm doing. That's up to you. Like, but still be recognizing that power. And I think if there's more emphasis put on that sense of accountability as artists, and really artists, you know, development comes with a sense of, you know, feeling the gravity of the power of your words. I think that's a conversation that we definitely need to be honest about ourselves with, as hip hop cultural icons, so to speak.
Absolutely. Wow. Thanks for saying that. That was dope. And a lot comes up. Rondell, J Rebel, any responses? I have some next questions, but I don't want to put you on the spot / leave you in the dark either.
I guess the only thing that I'd add is that I don't know if anybody brought it up, because I was jumping back and forth, but the intersections between race and mental health and economics. You know what I mean? Like we live in a, you know, a capitalist society, and obviously people got to work and make money, but a lot of people are out of work right now, and not everybody has like a strong support network, you know, people that they can rely on. So I just feel like there's that component, and there's also the stuff around, you know, police brutality and some of the other issues that particular groups deal with more disproportionately, and also how that affects mental health. So it'd be interesting to kind of look at, like, you know, I guess like data and kind of understanding how different groups and different populations are affected significantly by like different issues. Because I feel mental health is like a broad brush, you know what I mean? And I feel like different communities need different solutions and different resources, you know? And then also intersection between gender, you know, as we talked about emo rap, and, you know, it's more socially acceptable for a woman to express herself and to cry. But like I said, like if you look at these songs, they may not be crying in the video and, you know, and sobbing, but it's like it's a cry for help. And I feel like this conversation's been happening longer than we realize, you know? So I feel like identifying and coming up with appropriate resources, and looking at how different things affects mental health. So like race, gender dynamics, and then also economics. Yeah, just to add on.
I definitely agree. I think when I think about it, you know, just some of the ways, you know, I'm able to use hip hop. Just really, I think about just obviously writing. Spoken word has been a big thing for me personally, and you know, I think it's just really about embracing vulnerability as well. I guess just, you know, vulnerability is really seen as something that makes us weak, but I think to be able to get up on a stage or to record something that really resonates with who you are as a person is really important. And, you know, we need to just, you know, just make room. I think writing itself is cathartic, and I think it's important to make room that we can just write and process our thoughts on paper, but also embrace being vulnerable with people that we trust, and you know, just make that space for us to really put some things out there, especially right now when, you know, as a performer, I love to be on stage. I love share my energy, but we don't have that opportunity at this time. And I'm sure many of you guys can agree too. It's definitely not the same, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. Isolation, pandemic, you know, Black Lives Matter movement, all the racism, all these things going on in the world that in isolation is like a pressure chamber, you know. And I'm curious to Jay Rebel's point and Rondel's point of just like, how are those things intertwined in the moment, you know, like with the pandemic, with all these things going on. How does that connect to things like community trauma, especially for Black and racialized young people who are, you know, maybe involved in the criminal justice system, some of the work that Soli does. Like, there are differences that we need to talk about, and resources that need to be allocated appropriately. How do we direct those resources? How do we start that conversation? How do we keep that conversation going? I'm curious what comes up for you.
Well, I think we're doing it right now, you know, like obviously a lot of us know about each other, but we're actually coming together intentionally to have this discussion. So I feel like that's the beginning. And then, you know, following up, because I feel like with Toronto in particular, like it's, people are very siloed into their own little, you know, communities and organizations, and even the youth themselves. Like there's kids that don't leave this block, you know, from Shoreham to Driftwood to the Lane, you know, and even that is like a step for them to even travel within their own community. So I feel like creating opportunities for the, you know, young people that we work with or people that we're connected to also have these conversations and experiences, and getting to them when they're young, you know. Like I work with elementary school kids in schools, and I do a lot of programming in schools. So I feel like kind of create like, you know, cross neighborhood and cross organizational collaborations and stuff like solitary in the jails, you know what I mean? And I know people who work with the youth before they get caught up in the criminal justice system. So to try to make those connections, you know? And also when those young people come out, right, they're also coming back into these communities with not only the trauma from going in, but also coming out of jail. And there's a lot of mental health issues associated with being incarcerated and trying to come back into society and not having the appropriate skills and support systems to be successful, you know what I mean? So it's like it's a revolving door, because these issues are not new. Like I'm 37, turning 38 next year. You know what I mean? And I've been seeing these things in my community since I was young. So you're talking about 4 decades of the same stuff. You know what I mean? Like these issues are not new. I just feel like, you know, whether it's lack of political will or pressure or people's ability to, you know, to create resources, like sustainability is a big issue, especially for those of us who do nonprofit work, or, you know, and trying to get money and convince these funders that these programs and these things are literally saving lives, you know, and trying to convey that, you know, over and over again through proposal and proposal. And it's like, after a while, you get burnt out, as you mentioned earlier, and you kind of feel defeated, because, you know, you're only scratching at the surface when it's like a deep rooted thing, and it's not one thing, you know what I mean? So I feel like these conversations, but also following up with one another and trying to, you know, like I said, create those bridges and those pathways so that our youth can, you know, connect and benefit from those things and kind of learn from what's been done, you know, in the past. So that's it.
Yeah, those cross partnerships are so important. Like, even if everyone in this room to just connect one more time after this, you know, like, what would happen? I don't know, but I think some things could happen. You know what I mean? And that but we're tired, you know. At the same time, like even the idea of connecting one more time is tiring. So
You know, the funding and the work for, you know, it takes for community organizations to justify to the government to get these grants has always, any grant meet, anybody who's ever been at a grant meeting where they have like a community call out and they always ask, you know, people who are support workers to come and get feedback. The first thing I always say is if you guys are giving out grants and you're not looking for at least like 5 years of invested time in like really tackling these issues, then you're just you're you know you're covering everything up with, you're covering up a gaping hole in the ground with leaves, you know. I always say that, and people, you know, I'm a little bit of a hippie when it comes to money. Even when I was young and just wanted to be like a superstar and you wanted to drive cars and like have all the girls and have nice things, but I never cared about money. I never cared about the accumulation of money and how much money I have. It was always about experiences. And, you know, the reason why I highlight that is because money is not real. Like the fact that in this pandemic, the government said, my God, we have to tell people to stay home because we have to protect people's health. And we can't ask people to stay home from work without them generating an income. They got to pay their rent, they got to pay their phone bill, they got to eat. So what do we got to do? Well, if we're asking them to stay home, then we got to give them some money, right? So they created the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit Fund. Poof, out of nowhere. Everybody was eligible to get $2,000 every, what it was, like $2,000 a month. That gesture is an indication of we have a real issue, we have a real problem, and right now, money's no object. We have to figure out how to address the issue. So when the government grants, like, don't get me wrong, I don't want to necessarily just completely, you know, shit on grants. They're essential. They've been able to help empower organizations to do great things, but it's the system of grants and this idea of like this, you know, this ivory tower of people saying, oh no, that's, you know, you can't do the work like that. When any one of these people will tell you the work is in the stairwells, it's on the corners, it's going and connecting with these youth where they are. You can't close a community center at 6 o'clock. I can't tell you how many youth workers have said that the youth need attention between 6 and 3 in the morning. Like that's when they need the support. You can't. So there's a fundamental disconnect in people who hold these purse strings for grants to understand that you're not going to see measurable results in the real issues that we're trying to address for years to come, maybe even not until the next generation. So how much are you willing to invest your time and resources into really addressing these problems? And that's why when you get into discussions about defunding the police and how like, oh, you want to just get rid of the police, who are you going to call when there's violence? It's like you're not really understanding this full scope of the problem if you're going to just you're going to seize on the word defund, or you're going to just like on all these kind of straw man, you know, like slippery slope, like, oh, well, if you do this and these hug a thug programs don't work. And it's like, you know, this you know, just like, you know what I'm saying, Rebel was saying is it's so complex that it has to be us continuing to strengthen these networks. And, you know, I'm definitely about that, making sure that we connect afterwards, networking, continuing to network and share these kind of resources.
beautifully said. Yeah. I mean, imagine someone just dropped $1 billion on everyone in this room to decide how we would distribute it. What would happen?
Half of that goes into savings right away. Definitely. Half into savings. And then I'm having a storyboard with all my problems and all my community issues. I'm making sure some of that money touches north for my Indigenous brothers and sisters, because $10 for a head of lettuce is not cutting it. And then I'm gonna touch back with my nurses and my you know, doctors in the Black community and see how we can put into place our own health system so that we can take care of each other, because it seems like there's a disconnect in the general healthcare system. A lot of times we get pushed through. And that's why a lot of these youth will turn to the community centers. I used to work at the rec for years. Parks and Rec was the only life I had, you know, and a lot of these kids will turn to music. Why? Because those two things will almost never fail them, right? And so if we're not going to be part of those solutions, then what are we doing sitting here talking about it? What are we doing here sharing how we feel and how mental health affects us, if we're not then going to take those experiences and our expertise to the streets? If we're not going to do, you know, RISE programs, if we're not going to do unity programs, if we're not going to do FU projects, what are we really doing in our community besides lip service? So I'm just so glad that everybody here gets the vision. Now, how do we get the money to fund the vision? You know, that's always been the issue, because it's going to take work. And after the work, we've seen during this pandemic, the racial divide, the marches, the protests, the sit-ins, the letters we've had to write, the emails we've had to send, the calls we've had to make to demand the basic human rights. When we burn out from all of those, from waking up every day, from being Black and trying not to die, when we wake up and then we go back to bed, what is the solution after that? Because that can't be everyday solution. Because on top of burnout, we have our own mental health issues that we need to deal with. And I know Silk was like, we should start off like, you know, at an AA meeting, be like, hi, I'm Phoenix and I have anxiety and depression. Hi, Phoenix, right? So, you know, my anxiety and my depression on top of what's going on being a Black queer female in the hip hop community and doing that 24/7 for the rest of my life. You know, I can't do it alone. And as much as I'm able to be there for others, how much of myself can I really give out before I have none left? And unfortunately, a lot of our youth are starting with a lot less than we did. And though a lot of us fortunately had the resources and didn't have the impact of social media as much, I'm realizing, working with a lot of these youth, that social media is their everything. And that plays a huge role in their mental health. So going on social media, and especially in the hip hop community, sharing your music and saying you don't have views, you don't have, you know, you don't have followers, you don't have all these things that now these people who can fix the solution are telling you you need, it's going to break you down. And so on top of all these things happening in the world, and then in your life, and then in the hip hop community, we need a, I don't know if fail safe is the word, but we need like a net to catch these kids. Because I'm turning 32 in November. I'm not gonna say I'm old, but I'm not the youngest kid anymore, you know? Like in the sorority, they called me mom, and I was like, you know, I get it, you're trying to say I'm sweet, and just, you know, that's nice, but like every interview, so who's the mom of the group? And you know, that affects your mental health. So just knowing that there's something for this next generation. I know, so cliche, but a lot of us is too late, and we're here with solutions, trying to feed these to the kids who are coming up, and we need to get it to them somehow.
I think also, yeah, man, it can be really overwhelming to feel like you as an individual, we as individuals, and everyone here does work in the community, I believe, need to be like the savior. And I think as individuals, we will face that burnout. I have to focus personally, and maybe it's just been because of my own mental health, on like one-on-one relationships. So a lot of times people think citywide, or they think neighborhood wide, or they think, and sometimes I just have to be like, yo, like, if I can pour into this person today, or if I can pour into this person this month or this week, and we all can think of people in our own minds that have made a major difference in our lives based on just that one-on-one connection that we have with that person. So I think it's like knowing your limitations too. It's definitely doing all the things you said. I'm not saying that those things aren't things to do, but also there's different people, right? There's people that plant seeds, there's people that water the seeds, there's people that, you know, prune this, like, you know, prune the garden. There's all these different roles that we play. And I just think being aware that like your one-on-one, how you love the people, not only in your household, but definitely in your household, how you like, so for example, people that are youth service workers or whatever, people working in the community, you know, how are your relationships back home? How are the relationships with yourself? How are the relationships with your parents, with your partner, with your children? So, you know, we need to also, I think, in addition to everything else, is like kind of bring it in a little bit, because the information highway and social media and the internet has made our world much smaller in ways, which is great. We get information that we didn't get before, which is great, but it's also not so great because now there's a barrage, especially like, I'm not going to say my age, but I'm older than the two people that have said their ages. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I at least have this foundation of however many years of without the internet, without social media influencing my world. But as you mentioned, for the ones that don't have that foundation, it's like they are receiving information at a much greater magnitude and rate than we ever did when we were that age, for some of us here. And it's like at one point you just kind of have to be like, okay, how can I make a difference in my little small sphere of influence, whatever that is? How can I touch this person's life? How can I be there for this person when they're crying? How can I, maybe connect this person to this person for a resource? Sometimes you're not the answer, but you're connecting someone to a beginning of an answer. You know what I mean? So I think for me, in order to not have panic attacks and anxiety or whatever, it's just realizing like the scope of what I'm able to do and just focusing on like the people in front of me. And because we're artists, there are many people in front of us. It's not like we're just talking about the 3 people in our house, even through COVID, you know what I'm saying? We're here with each other, but just knowing that your influence one-on-one, there was a question that you had sent to us in advance about your formal or informal ways of supporting people in their mental health. And for me, it's like the informal ways are the ways that go so much further in a sense, sometimes than the formal ways. We can all drop songs and we could all, represent different platforms like I have done with like different organizations. But at the end of the day, it's like those one-on-one relationships are the ones that that really change people's lives and support people. So for each other, we do that for each other. Phoenix, I have cried on your shoulder and you have cried on mine.
No lies detected.
Right.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I just feel so strongly that like if we can be there for each other, like you said, Eternia, like, wow, what would the world be like? We get that $1 billion, we're there for each other. Maybe $1 trillion. Let's change it to trillion, but it's not about money.
I might buy a fat gold chain too, just on the side though.
I feel like you'd be the last person to buy a fat gold chain.
For the culture, you got to for the culture.
For the culture, man. For the culture.
Oh, for the culture. Okay. Fair.
Yeah, Eternia touched on a very crucial point, and it's definitely a part of our DNA at FU, which is it's where everybody has a piece of the puzzle. Everybody, even people who don't know that they have a piece of the puzzle, because we're all part of the narrative, and I think that you can't carry that burden alone. I actually think that for me, I've been doing, this kind of mentorship and community work kind of like freelance. It's always been a part of it. There's only recently, like in the last 5 years, that it's been formalized working with FU. And I think it's been beneficial because it's given me wisdom and the ability to kind of separate the emotional investment it takes to administer this kind of work that causes that kind of burnout when you're like, it's almost like the analogy for athletes. Like there's a difference between running a sprint and a long distance. It's a sprint. You can't run a 400 meter like a 100 meter. You're going to get burned out by 200 meters. So it's like you recognizing that, we all have a role to play.
Absolutely. Yes. And
I just have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean to interrupt, but is everybody here like out in Canada right now? Because I'm actually in the United States. Just wondering.
I'm presently in Providence, Rhode Island. I hop around, but I'm from Toronto.
I feel you. I mean, I'm out here in Minneapolis, basically the hotbed of what happened with George Floyd in regards to everything else that has really been extreme. I will say one thing in particular. I work for Minneapolis Public Schools as well. I mean, you speak about like those sort of links that actually do work with other students. I think one of the biggest ordeals that I deal with, at least on a daily, is how exactly do I keep these kids just interactive? How do I keep them from actually caring about their environment? And I guess it really does kind of start with us. Those little small moments that we do have to really say, like, you know what, times right now are hurting, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to hurt with it. Now, I mean, I don't know who exactly you guys are supporting politically, but I think we have one of the most irresponsible people It just irritates me just for a tiny bit of a person that is in charge of us right now. But that being said, it's like, and especially for someone like myself who just come from the military as well. I served for 6 years in the Air Force. But more than anything, it's the idea of actually displaying that leadership. That's what I've really gotten out of everything that has happened this past summer. I mean, for most of us here in Minneapolis, it was hell. I'm not even gonna front. The day after the actual police station shut down and got destroyed, that's where my sister kind of called me up from DC going, Dante, you want me to fly you out here? I'm like, I don't know about all that. I think I'll be fine because more than anything, I had some friends that were willing to actually have me bunker just up north of Minnesota. So I was actually cool just for that weekend. Came back that Tuesday. Everything is absolutely fine. But I know like the solid hotbed. And I guess this is a question for all of you. Let's say something like George Floyd actually did happen within each of your sections of the United States, wherever you guys may be. How exactly do you think your community would respond? Because one thing I did like that I thought was pretty dope, and I don't know if you've seen pictures, but the area over by East Lake Street, where Target was destroyed, where Cub was destroyed, where that AutoZone was destroyed, you had people coming out of the hundreds cleaning up. Even a guy in a Spider-Man costume cleaning up right by the Domino's. You think I'm joking? I am dead serious. Look that shit up online. He was actually cleaning up and actually greeting the kids that were actually there. So I guess my question is like, if something like that happened, I don't mean to bring like the level down with you guys, but if something like that happened within your hood, in your neck of the woods, how do you think your community would respond?
Well, I just want to say one time, mad love to you, Dante, and mad love to Minneapolis. I've never been, and I had to Google to make sure that I spelt it correctly. But it, knowing that people like you are there, it makes me, think about what would happen if it were to happen here. And I don't know if you know too much about Toronto. A lot of people like to joke. No, eh? He's like, nah, never been. No. All right.
Well, I will be honest. I had at least a lady friend at the time who made me drive up to Canada in college, but that's a whole different story. Go ahead.
Well, shout out to your lady friend. So in Toronto, we've had a few major incidences, one of which was actually it's kind of labeled like a terrorist attack, but not really. It was a van attack where a male actually rented a van and drove it down the sidewalk, killed some people. And it was interesting because it happened just like in the northern part of our city. Was a pretty diverse crowd that lives out there. And they had a memorial after it happened. And a lot of people came out to the memorial and, showed love and support. Then we had an incident in the Greek area of our town with a mass shooting. And in Canada, this is not as common as in the States. And so that, again, drew a lot of community support. So I know those incidents weren't involving police brutality or police injustice, but those incidents happen in Canada. I personally don't feel that it is as bad as that. Like there was one incident where an officer shot an unarmed young person of color, and he's in jail now. Or well, he was just released because Canada doesn't do like long sentences, but he did time. And we don't have a grand jury of citizens who decides whether or not a case gets heard. You get arrested, you get a court date, and you go to court. So I can only imagine, like, being over here, for me, the anxiety of thinking about whether or not someone will even face justice. Like, that's not an option here. And something as egregious as being visually caught, like, I can't bring myself to watch the video, and I will never, but to see somebody take someone's life in such a way that has no justification whatsoever is absolutely gut-wrenching. And one of my friends said it best: it took a pandemic, economic slowdown, and whatever else was happening at the time, because I don't know if it was killer bees or hornets, whatever was going on in February or March, just before April and May, right? Like when I don't know about the States, but I think the pandemic really hit in Canada in like March, April, things started shutting down. So we were a little slow that way. But it took all of that for people to realize that this was going on. You know, George Floyd's death was not the first. It was not even, you know, one the in the hundreds. Like this has been happening, and it took people having no other option but to sit and watch to be outraged. So when you ask what would happen here, we marched. I don't know if you saw, but the march we had was one of the biggest marches in North America. And we're Canadian, like we ride, you know, black is black, whether it's on this side of the border or that side. And even in Toronto, especially, we're such a diverse community that when these things happen, we're able to put our little petty differences aside and come together and ride. So I wish that on America. I wish that on Minneapolis. I know what's going on politically. Trust me, we know, and we all know what needs to happen, right? I mean, I don't want to say too much because, you know, Fez is always watching, but we know what needs to happen. And yet we are not in the position to make it happen as quickly and as strongly as we wish. And that's what causes part of the frustration. And that's what, you know, brings about those mental health issues that we're already dealing with, being Black, being in a, you know, whether we work for the education system or the you know, military defense system, whatever system we're working for, that is not working for us. So just know that we in Toronto, we're sending you mad love, wishing you safety, and thanking you for, you know, allowing us to support you in whatever way we can. It's been hard, you know, and I can see that you are a young Black man. I can only imagine, you know, me being a young Black woman, I'm sending you so much love and knowing that I'm here for you, King. I'm wishing you all the best.
Well, blessings for that. I really do appreciate that. But it hurts me that even north, it's like there's still issues. But I love the fact that you said everybody was coming together. I do like that part of it. But it just kills me because I was actually hoping to get an actual passport to come up your way. Not even joking. Like the second, like that damn man got elected, I'm like, you know what? I'm done. Get me the hell out of here soon.
Yeah, we're gonna need you to quarantine for a couple of months before we're
I mean, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. But I do appreciate that. I really do, because I know people here in Minneapolis. It's the struggle after what happened. George Floyd has weighed down. It's a lot calmer, but you can honestly tell like the strain of it is kind of waning. And not just for someone like me, but I know for a lot of my students that I have to speak with online all the time. And a lot of times when you see something like that, it's like, how do you give them just the encouragement to really finish school? And a lot of the students I'm working with right now are seniors. Like I started with them 2016, now it's 2020, they're about to graduate. And the stress of what's going to happen to me when I graduate? Am I going to be safe? Is everything going to be cool? Should I leave the city? We only have so many answers, but I know the one thing that I can honestly just say is stay focused. That's been like my main credo, at least at this point. And I know the idea of going out there really hurts. I mean, for me, and I think you kind of said it earlier, it was like, if I walk outside, like, is something even going to attack me? Well, at this point, it's almost like you got both sides attacking. It's like on one way, it could be actual COVID-19. On another way, it could be solid racism. But in a case like this, it's a matter of solid responsibility, which leads me back to the president on how in the hell you can't be that responsible during a time like this. It's moments like this that really make me really annoyed that I served and I was that close to reenlisting, that close, and I said, hell no, you are not getting me again. I don't care how much a damn bonus it is. I'm not going back. I just had to put that out there because
listen, he led. He went out front and he led. And he was strong. He was a strong leader and he led.
Well, you know, Hitler was a strong leader too. I'm just saying, right? It's not about how well of a leader you are. It's about what you do with the power you're given by your people. And he has betrayed that power. And come November, he will be reminded that those people will not stand. That's the only option at this point, because COVID's doing a number on us. Racism's been doing a number on us, and we need a break. Something's got to give. And just so you know, Dante, Michelle has been sharing some articles in the chat of incidences that have happened in Toronto and in Canada regarding police violence against young Black men. So definitely you can check some of those out. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing those.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to say real quick, I know I talk too much in regards to your students. A lot of us in here are educators and have worked with the youth, and we know how much their passion drives us. And we know that when we see the hope in their eyes, it feels like the world's going to be okay. So I can only imagine for yourself as an educator, when you see that hope kind of dwindling and you see that passion waning just a bit, you feel like your heart might not be able to take whatever it is that they're ready to give you.
Right.
And I want you to know that that is okay. And I want you to know that it's okay to tell them that it's okay. Because what you want to do is create that space for them to be comfortable with the uncertainty of the future. This is coming from somebody who has horrible anxiety, horrible depression.
Me too.
All I have, right, is knowing that all I know is that I don't know anything. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what the future holds. And it's better to not know with people than to feel like you're supposed to know by yourself. So just remind them that you're all going through this together. I don't know about you guys, but this is my first pandemic. Anyone here for the second time? Anyone here was around for Spanish flu and whatever else came before? No, right? So we're all going through this together. It's our first time. We're not going to get it right the first time. We didn't get it right the first time when COVID wasn't here. So just let them know, look, I couldn't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, but I can tell you I'll be here to figure it out with you. And that can be the most comforting message that they will hear going into their last times of education. That's my 15. I'm going to mute my mic now. Much love to you, Dante.
Blessings for real.
Wow. I just got to say, Dante and everyone, thank you. And thank you for sharing, because this has just been, you know, that feeling where you just kind of let things go. And I felt like that was one of those moments. I was all like, oh, I got to follow the script and this, and like that. You couldn't have planned like the fact that you would open up and share and connect in that way. So Dante, I want to just thank you for having the courage to share and be in the space with us today. And, you know, Phoenix, obviously, just all the mentorship within this room is beautiful. And I think about the puzzle that Solitaire brought up before, and you know, there are pieces of that puzzle in this room right now. There are pieces of that puzzle that we need to bring into the room that didn't show up today but knew this was happening. There are pieces of the puzzle that didn't know this was happening and need to know that this is happening, this conversation, and we need to pull them into the conversation to the point in which this is recorded. So maybe it could be sent to John Tory, Justin Trudeau, and maybe not that, no, I'm just kidding. But sent to all the politicians who need to hear this, because how do we hear these conversations that are only happening, you know, and the power of it starting here and spreading further is real power, and that power can make change. So I really applaud you all for spending time here tonight and giving your hearts to this conversation. You know, I really am curious about how politics play into mental health in the Canadian context, even as well as the American context. You know, that is something that that impacts us, with the way that funds are distributed, but also the way that, you know, communities are represented. And just back to the hip hop conversation, like, you know, how do we not get to that E in our fuel tanks, you know, especially if we're starting further back. So I wonder, you know, how you support young people to not get to E before it's too late, you know. And the one thing we didn't talk about is, you know, sort of that end of the road and really supporting people in crisis, you know, and how you do that.
For me, I don't mean to necessarily interject, like, once again, but for me, it's almost like making them feel like it's okay to talk. There was a sign that I remember back on my base back in 2015 of a drill sergeant, campaign hat, screaming, like the scream bubble actually said, "You're not weak if you ask for help." But I really think that within the Black community, there is the stigma of, I can't go to a doctor because that means I'm crazy. So there has to be at least like this mad segue of actually making people feel good about talking about this, because this isn't necessarily, it isn't necessarily one of those things where it's simply just impacting Black people, it's impacting everybody. But at this point, we can speak about Black people specifically because I've kind of grown up with the idea that if you ask for help, then we can't look up to you, we can't speak to you. So me personally, I kind of took it upon myself over a couple of years ago to actually make an album due to something like this called The Hell I Know, which actually speaks about my anxiety attacks that I personally have, like on a, well, I don't have them as much on a daily basis, but I know like when they were really bad, like really, really bad, it was hard for me to communicate with anybody. It was hard for me to even be on stage to rock a mic at all. Like it was just bad. There has to be at least some point in which our lives, maybe not within my 37 years on earth, but maybe like for the rest of us, of trying to balance out this requiem of making people feel good about expressing their pain, expressing their anxiety, because we are just what, 14 people within a Zoom conversation, but there are going to be a lot of kids out there who are going to feel really, what's the word I'm looking for? The peer pressure of saying there's something wrong with me. Oh, that must mean I'm crazy. It's like, how do we flip that narrative? I guess that's my question to really interject on that.
Very interesting. I will respond to that, but I do want to clarify. I used the term Spanish flu just a moment ago, and I was educated quite kindly by Zoe that that term is incorrect. So just like COVID-19 is not the Chinese flu, the 1918 flu, I guess, 1918 flu pandemic is not correctly termed Spanish flu. So thank you, Zoe, for educating me. I had no idea. Dante, in regards to how we kind of flipped the script, I don't know about what campaigns or what branding happens in the States in terms of like around Mental Health Day or Mental Health Month or Mental Health Week or Men's Health Week or whatever health week's going on or month. In Canada, we have something called Bell Let's Talk. So we have a phone company called Bell, and they have a campaign where for every tweet you send or whatever message you send and you hashtag Bell Let's Talk, they send 5 cents towards a mental health initiative for youth and communities. So,
man, do we need that here?
Yeah, I agree. It's something to take, up top, but I mean, I think it would have to start with the people up there. But so we have initiatives like that where corporations get involved. And then we have a mental health act that actually is specifically for people who are in crisis or deal with mental health issues. We also have our Ontario Human Rights Code, which makes sure that you cannot discriminate against people based on their disability. And for a while, disability was like physical, right? Like if you like visible disabilities, but now it's been amended to accommodate invisible disabilities. So PTSD, anxiety, panic attacks, depression, all these things that deal with the mind. And so I would say that Canada itself is doing a good job of keeping track of the issues that are going on. We also have the Canadian Association of Mental Health, or as we call it, CAMH. It's a center you can go and you can receive treatment or see a psychiatrist based on the level of crisis that you're in. That being said, it all sounds lovely, doesn't it? Well, I bet you didn't know CAMH currently has a 2.5 year wait list for their inpatient program. You probably also didn't know that originally CAMH had about 4 sites and has recently closed down 3 of them, 1 remaining open for outpatient only. Now, the staff at CAMH are overwhelmed, and there's a high turnover rate, which means once you get acquainted with one psychiatrist, that psychiatrist gets moved to another unit, and then you have to start all over again with another psychiatrist. So needless to say, while all this sounds great, and it sounds like there's money being put into mental health, there are still holes, there are still gaps, there are still issues and errors that need to be worked out. So all the pieces are there in terms of general mental health. And then once you start with, as Jay Rebel was talking about, dealing with specific mental health to cultures and communities, going into the community where young Black men are dealing with people assuming that they are aggressive just because they are expressive. Bars, right? So you have people who are not used to Black people talking loudly and not being violent or not being aggressive, which is unfortunately a lot of what interacts with police, what causes police interactions, not being able to recognize the general everyday interactions between the Black community or other communities that are often misunderstood in general. On top of that, you have these communities that also deal with their own issues of whether or not to acknowledge and embrace mental health. Now, I'm West Indian. Mental health is not a thing in West Indian culture. You need Jesus, you need to pray about it. Those are your two options. So when you have a lot of people who are from certain communities and maybe we have a lot of immigrant population that come here from different countries and cultures and try to assimilate to Canadian culture. However, the Canadian system of mental health already kind of falling apart, doesn't know how to specifically deal with those communities and their specific mental health needs. All of that to say, there's a lot of work to be done. So I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in, but I hope that answers your question.
So even in Canada, y'all still have some mental
We don't
health
have all of our shit figured out, no, just some of it. We make it look real good with the shit we do have together though.
I heard so many good things about Canada.
The grass is always greener on the other side, but definitely want to give a space to open up the I was going to say open up the dance floor, but open up the, I was like, what the hell am I saying? Man, it's 7 o'clock. I don't even know what that means. Oh, I've just been told, no, I'm being untold things I'm being told. This is, if you could only see what's happening in the private chat box, it's fantastic. It's okay, as long as we can laugh at it. And now I'm getting LOLs in the private chat box. So what was I supposed to, oh yeah, so I was gonna open up the floor for questions. We already jumped into it with Dante. I had a few requests from folks if the floor was gonna be opened up. So for some folks who haven't had the chance to ask a question, to anyone on the panel specifically or openly, please, now's your chance. The floor is yours.
I was wondering if I could ask a question. I know some of y'all here and honored to know you guys. Can everyone hear me? Sorry. I'm just wondering if, I guess one question that I think, I love hip hop and part of me wonders if the idea of mental health, is there room in hip hop, in the culture? I mean, kind of not involved with the government and CAMH and other organizations, but in the culture itself, almost on a grassroots level. Is there room or do we need to make a shift to have more safe spaces in terms of, what I mean is, oftentimes when we think of hip hop culture, not all the time, but oftentimes you think of, you got to be hard, you got to be aggressive, right? There's no room to be quote unquote weak, soft, hurting, stuff like that. And people might get it in their crews if your crew is close enough and you can share life and talk. But I wonder if just hearing this discussion, and I'm only asking the question, not saying this is the answer, I'm just asking the question because y'all are way more involved in hip hop than I am. But is there a need or a change in terms of the culture itself to say you don't always have to be hard? You don't always, like, there's got to be a space where we can talk and listen and not just be like, yo, over it, yo, walk it off, yo, you know, that kind of stuff, and just be like, yo, I like, as a man, I need to cry right now, or I need to talk to somebody about this issue. But when the kind of I don't know if y'all know what I'm trying to say, right? And the stereotype is you got to be hard and nothing can go wrong and you got to just answer everything with violence or aggression. There's no room for that kind of thing. So I don't know if the image or the actual culture of hip hop needs to adjust a little bit more to, I don't know.
I'd like to answer that one. And this is just coming from somebody who's been around the rhyme sayers, been around a lot of artists here in Minneapolis. It really does come with the representation. We spoke about representation a lot within this entire panel, and I think it really does come down to that. An artist really does have to step up to really help with such a narrative that you're speaking with Young Doe. Somebody has to really step up. I mean, I'm willing to do that. I guess the really question is, are there going to be more artists to really step up and represent in such a fashion? Because yeah, it really does attack us. And I personally feel that there may be a lack of artists like this. but I do believe that we're coming into a brand new generation in which voices in such moments like this are going to speak on issues like this. I do. I personally believe. I don't know about anybody else.
I was wondering what Randall had to say about this, because I think that your currency is vulnerability and transparency, or one of your currency with the people that you serve in your community. I thought about you right away, Randall. I don't know if you're there. Is he? Maybe he's not.
We can't hear you, Randall, but we see you. We can't hear you.
Do you have to unmute? Do you just have to unmute, or?
He's speaking, but there's nothing. Do you want to unplug the headphones or no? Is it, maybe it's a.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yo, I've been unmuted though. My end the whole time.
Crazy.
Hold on, let me try this again because it was working the whole time. Y'all hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, that was so weird. Okay. Yeah, I mean, thank you for spinning that over to me, Tony. Yeah, I think for me, when I think about vulnerability, I remember just growing up and always being told by my brothers and, you know, just family. I'm West African from Ghana. So my people didn't really talk about our stuff. We didn't really talk about what was going on. And, you know, you see it in hip hop, you see it in the hood, you see it in the community. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to, because I don't know, man, in my hood, everyone just felt comfortable to talk to me about what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, yo, my dad's not really around, or my mom's always working, so I got to take care of my younger siblings. And people felt comfortable to come and talk to me about this stuff. And so, you know, we're human. Even the grimiest thug has love for his daughter or his son. You know what I'm saying? All of us at a very mundane level have a level of vulnerability that we're willing to express to one another. But I think we have to literally break down the barriers of what vulnerability is. And what I wanted to do with Rise, I wanted to make positivity cool again, because I think it's cool to be really positive. I think it's cool to be able to be yourself and be authentic, because just because you're being shown what it could look like to be a young Black male, or what it could look like to be a part of hip hop culture, I don't think we necessarily have to follow it. So it was really about making positivity cool and reminding people that vulnerability takes a lot of courage. And that's why I love spoken word. So we initially just started off with spoken word, right? So people were just writing their feelings on paper, and then they were able to take that and, you know, cut down the syllables and make it into hip hop essentially, right? So that's something I really wanted to encourage with the youth that I work with, you know, in the school board, the youth that I work with at Rise, just to take your feelings and put it on paper. And I also wanted to remind them, like, there's this phrase I've been saying for a while, and it's called "We suffer to inspire." And I really feel like if suffering is inevitable, if each and every single one of us are going to go through it, then we can actually do something about it. Because what you're going through, J Rebel, what you're going through, Mikey, Dante, all of you, somebody has something that you can benefit, they can benefit from you having spoken your story, you know. And so I wanted to be a vessel to remind people, you know, and just share all the things I've been through, you know, times I almost lost my life and things that happened when I was younger, to just show people like vulnerability takes a lot of courage, man. Takes a lot of courage to be able to do so. And it's like the opposite of weakness.
That's why I asked you, because I feel like more people such as yourself, not only showing vulnerability as cool, because people think you're kind of cool, you know what I mean? But also starting organizations where you're propelling all these young people to also step into their own vulnerability and transparency and weakness, not as weakness, but as strength. And so Young Doe, that's why I thought of Rise. But I think we all have the ability to kind of do in smaller ways or in different ways what Randall did. And a part of it for me is diversity of perspectives in hip hop is so important. I didn't really rock with like a Little Kim or a Foxy Brown in the 90s. I didn't. I loved Lauryn Hill, but at least they were all on the airwaves. And I just think that, and with the internet now, there is diversity of perspectives in hip hop, more so, but it's just important to hear more people with varying perspectives, including the perspective of vulnerability or sharing pain in a way that just doesn't, you know, brush it off or whatever. So yeah, I just say that we all have the ability to make vulnerability cool, and that diversity of perspectives is really important too. In every single little enclave of hip hop you find.
Absolutely.
I want to add to that too. I think it's more important to focus on the things that you can change. You know, this idea of of like trying to carve out a space in hip hop for permission to be vulnerable, I think is I think it's a fool's errand in the sense of, you know, the culture is the DNA of the culture is what it is. I think the focus needs to be on building up how these young people value themselves. What is their self-esteem? What is your self-worth? Because I think in when you realize to how to define your value not from external factors and how society thinks you should be as a hip hop artist or as a whatever that role is that you're, you know, that you're filling, um it's like you when you create that, any iconic artist in any genre is usually the artist that's forged a path that has been, you know, untraveled. So this idea of like asking hip hop to, you know, like, can we create a space? I don't think it's about asking permission for, I mean, that's just not hip hop. Hip hop doesn't ask permission. Hip hop is expressive. I think once you're able to establish a sense of identity in these youth, and it's not, you know, it's not groupthink. It's not like trying to do things to fit into this peer group, but it's about choosing your friends and not being chosen by your friends, being a, you know what I mean, like being the biggest factor in the choices that you make rather than trying to fit into what is the aesthetic of hip hop. That's actually one of the biggest things I think that is detrimental to hip hop, is this idea of people perpetuating what they think is necessary to be successful as a hip hop artist. You know, that's a big part of the problem, as opposed to supporting music that you love, and not that's music that is like, you know, recognizing music that is damaging. And again, this whole idea of accountability for the messages that you put out. You know, somebody like Randall, like being that change, so to speak, like, you know, as the saying goes, the focus has to be on that rather than trying to find a space of acceptance. Accept yourself, accept what is, who you are, what you want to contribute, be clear about your message. I think that's probably a more valuable endeavor than trying to ask hip hop to change. I think whenever people, you know, we all have this tendency to point our fingers about what we need, what the system needs to change, and what racism, you know, people who are racist, what they need to change. One of the most powerful questions that we ask is, what's one of your most closely held beliefs that upon receiving new information caused you to change your mind? How easy is it for you to change your own back? How many of us smoke? How many of us, you know, eat a little bit too much sugar? Present. How many of us maybe drink a little too much? How many of us have bad habits? I wish I could exercise more. How difficult is it for you to change that mindset of your own habits? And then you realize that all these changes that we're asking people to make, it's a process thing. So the only thing that you could really exercise control over is your reaction to it, right? That's 99% of it. So I think instead of asking hip hop to create a space, I think you forge that space by being yourself and making
It
that.
sounds like you're talking about cultivating thought leaders, like individual thought leaders.
That's, I mean, that's what changes societies, right? People who are willing to accept new information and make adjustments to their insights according to that. That's why, you know, I in a very strong way really see myself as a philosopher, because, and we're all philosophers, because I think that we're exchanging a knowledge base that is greater than our individual pieces of knowledge that we all brought to the table. We're creating more thought leaders in that sense. I think that's got to be the focus. How do we create unique individuals that don't buy into the status quo?
Authenticity. Got you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Heck yeah.
That's really dope. What Sally was talking about, man. I think, you know, just on the perspective, like anything we go through is really about us first, right? And one thing that I've been learning personally through COVID, you know, and which was mentioned by from Phoenix, is just the importance of, you know, being comfortable with uncertainty, and mitigating our thoughts. Like, I think it's just so easy to be enraptured in thought, in the anxious thoughts, the depressive thoughts that really, you know, we get so caught up in, and that really hope binds us and binds our identity to the things that we think. Like that's what the mind is supposed to do. It's supposed to think. It's supposed to bounce back and forth between, you know, things that happened a year ago that you haven't quite let go of, and things that are about to happen that you're unsure of. That's what the mind does. It just does that for what it is, you know?
Filth, then read me to filth. Go ahead.
You know, I think it's important to recognize, like, that's literally what the mind does. And so it's important that, you know, as all of us here are, you know, creating safe spaces as educators or people, you know, in these phases, I think it's important that we recognize that, you know, it's tough. I'm not saying like I've mastered this, because I'm still learning every day. But how do we maintain, like, you know, we create these safe spaces. Even here, this is a very safe space. Look how open we've been among one another to share our experiences with one another. But I think it's important that we too can be safe spaces, not only for other people, but for ourselves. Because some of the thoughts that we go through are very detrimental. You know what I'm saying? Some of the thoughts I had when COVID first started, oh my God, you know, the things that were coming out of me, I was like, shit, you know what I'm saying? Things that meditation was really bringing out of me. And I was like, man, I don't want to face this. But, you know, you just had to do what you had to do. So I think, you know, being able to create safe spaces for ourselves, to be able to mitigate ideas and pain, and facilitate the healing and the trauma that we've been through, you know. But there's a book I read a little earlier. It's called The Untethered Soul. Highly recommend it to every single person if you haven't read it. But it's just so dope, man. And it's really about being the observer. You know, how do we be observant of the thoughts? How do we be observant of depression, the observant of anxiety, you know, and just like give space to thought, because it's a thought, and we have monkey mind, you know? So yeah, man, how do we continue to be those safe spaces for ourselves and other people, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Wow. Thank you, Rondell, and everyone. This has been a beautiful conversation, and such an important one in this time where that monkey mind is rampant, and those negative thoughts, sometimes they seep in, you know, in random moments, and sometimes they last for a long time. So how do we pull ourselves out of that in the four walls, or wherever we are? So thank you. And there's just been so much knowledge dropped today, and so many beautiful questions, so many beautiful books, so many important readings, like things to really follow up on. I feel like, you know, how people plan these things they call conferences, and they're like, they got all these speakers to like speak on a podium. Like, imagine, you know, we had washroom breaks and meals and stuff delivered, and we're just like chilling and talking about this, but like towards some sort of a goal, you know, like let it sort of flow and get some of that out on paper. But like, they talk about city planners, like imagine, I don't know, I always throw that out there because like I really do imagine, like, why do they give certain people certain jobs? And then, you know, I have conversations like this, I'm like, man, we could just get together and create something that does not exist.
I was listening to sorry to interject. I was listening to a podcast. Man, I'm forgetting. I think it's Making Sense with oh, what's his name? Sam Harris, I think his name is. Anyway, he has this, and if you guys haven't watched that, The Social Dilemma on Netflix, I definitely advise watching that. In the podcast, though, yeah, it's Making Sense with Sam Harris. He mentions the idea. He's like, you know, in regards to social media and how destructive is, as much as it's been, you know, constructive, it's been destructive in a way that we couldn't have anticipated. He's talked about how, you know, we always thought about, you know, whether artificial intelligence would, you know, develop and like machines would end up killing off humans, when really social media has kind of like started to curate and divide us more than we could have ever imagined. And he really highlighted something that resonated with me. He's like, how many people, you know, move to what they call it, what's that area where all the technologies, Silicon Valley or whatever, and you have some of the most brilliant minds in computer science and programming and technology whose focus is on creating more content, more apps that keep us engaged when these minds could be, focusing on climate change, on, social justice change. It's like it's all these minds have been used to focus on how do we make more money? How do we make, people stay online longer so they'll see our ads so they could buy more stuff, and how much that has impacted the way that we see things and digest things in society. And that's true. It's like, imagine we had like a government or an organization that was focused, like a think tank, just like they have at the Pentagon, that's focused on addressing these kind of issues. Like, how powerful that would be. That's good.
For real. No, thank you. And I think this is I just want to 100% say we need to create that, number one. Number two, I just want to pass it back to Zoe and the team, because I know, out of respect for everyone here, I could talk to all of you till midnight, and maybe we could, but yeah, I just want to just say thanks to Hart House for having us out.
So I don't have any, I'm not really on the agenda. This is really Jessica's lead on this event. So I'm just going to make a comment that, and I shared it with Jessica in the chat, just saying that there's just such a really actually very positive and warm and full of love vibe in this space, which I actually felt from when all the panelists jumped on. I thank everybody for their openness. And I can't remember, I think it was Randall, I think you were saying about talking about vulnerability, and like what a beautiful thing it is actually to be vulnerable, because I think when we're vulnerable, we are actually being our true selves, right? Yeah, it's been fun putting stuff in the chat. The last thing that I just put in there was Angel Kyoto Williams. Really highly recommend that podcast. She's a super interesting. She's only the second Black person to become a Zen Buddhist priest. She's queer as well, and just all her different intersections, really super interesting. So it's just my unrelated to closing off this event comment. So I'll let Jessica do that formally.
Well, yeah, just like Zoe said, thank you all for being here. Mike for moderating the conversation, all the guests being speakers and sharing stories. I mean, yeah, it was definitely a great space, and lots, learned a lot, and just really happy that, we were able to do this. So many important things, and I'm excited to get that playlist together too, because I think that is going to be great. So we'll definitely be sharing that with you. Yeah, so thank you for your time. So glad to see all of you all again, and hoping to continue to do more things together for sure.